Hello everyone, Will here from the St. Johns County Public Library System, and we're back for another edition of Quirky History. This edition of Quirky History is a little different. It is St. John's Reads this month, which is our One Community, One Read event, and we chose The Library Book by Susan Orlean. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, stop by one of our branches and be more than happy to put you on hold for a copy. So this month's Quirky History fits into that theme, so let's jump right into it. So this month's Quirky History is all about libraries. Libraries have a very, very long history. Lots of cultures, especially ones that relied on written word, have had some type of library for millennia. So we're going to jump right into it with the caveat that this is not the definitive history of libraries. This is a very, very quick synopsis of their history. So the earliest libraries that we know of currently, archaeologists could always find something older, appeared right here in the Fertile Crescent, between around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, this area known as Mesopotamia. So the libraries in this area weren't like public libraries today. You couldn't just walk in and check something out. They were really archives, and they used clay tablets in this region to keep a record of important events that happened in this area. Some of these tablets actually date from 2600 BC. That's pretty old, especially to survive that long. And so from this area, we're going to head right over to the Nile region, and we're going to talk a little bit about ancient Egypt. So ancient Egypt kept temple records on papyrus. They did not use clay, and you kind of see a theme. Both ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia area were concerned with keeping a record. They weren't concerned so much about writing for enjoyment. These written materials were not meant for the masses. They were meant for anyone who needed to have access to them. So now that we have two areas that are concerned about keeping records, as early as 1900 BC in Nippur and then 700 BC in another region, you see areas that realize we have enough material, we need to figure out a way to organize it so it's easily found. So they both start showing signs of a classification system. And that just means they organize in a way that if someone needs to find something from 20 years ago or earlier, they know where to go in the library to find it and read it. And especially if you're this library right here, which is a picture over here with my cursor, it contains 30,000 clay tablets, which is massive for the ancient world, right? And you can't just put 30,000 items together without trying to classify it somehow. So very quickly, these societies realize we need a way to organize our knowledge. And so next we're into the classical period. And this is when libraries start to become a little bit more showy. The facades are meant to prove the power of the ruler, and documents really start becoming the backbone of ruling systems. So documents are used to track lineage, to determine who can inherit the throne if a monarch passes. It helps them lay claim to territories. Rulers are really good about using documents to legitimize claims, whatever that claim might be. And this all culminates together to help make the Library of Alexandria. It's the largest and most significant great library of the ancient world. Unfortunately, it was destroyed, but there's tons of documentations that talk about how massive and beautiful and great this library was, all the volumes that were held there. So before public libraries, libraries were solely meant for religious authorities, government authorities, maybe scholars, academics, people like that. It wasn't something that the general public was encouraged to come and enter and pick up a material and read for pleasure or learning. The first public libraries in the West, so Western Europe, this does not hold true for the rest of the world, were established under the Roman Empire. And this is the first instance within Western Europe that you see the general public encouraged to come into a library and check something out or sit and read while in the premises. However, after the fall of the Roman Empire, libraries largely fell into four different categories. Imperial, which were owned and controlled by a monarchy. Patriarchal, monastic, so owned by religious authorities, or private if someone was rich enough to start their own. So once the Roman Empire ends, the western half falls and Western Europe enters into its medieval period. The eastern half of the Roman Empire morphs into the Byzantine Empire, and they continue to flourish. But Western Europe kind of sees this pullback in what's available to them when it comes to written material. So libraries in Western Europe become either private or monastic. So private as in it's a lord who has enough money to start their own library, or they're owned by a church because they're the only ones who have the money to afford books. Books at this time are handwritten and they take hours to copy. However, even though Western Europe became really insular in its learning and transmission of knowledge, the Middle East flourished. This is a big time of academic growth and learning in that region, and libraries flourished. By the 8th century AD, the Middle East has imported papermaking from China. And when I say Middle East, I'm referring to that region. There's multiple cultures that live there, but they all kind of picked up on this papermaking and really understood its use in transmitting knowledge. By the 9th century, you have academics either from a university or because of a Middle Eastern ruler that are copying large amounts of works into Arabic. Yes, some of these works are going to be centered around Islam and the Quran, but there were thousands of other works. They copied stuff from ancient Greece, ancient Rome, what we consider classical learning. Some of the similar things that happened during the Western Europe Renaissance were happening here in the Middle East. So they were happy to get knowledge from anywhere that they could. And this is what they put into their libraries. So real quick jaunt to the Middle East, we're going back to Western Europe and talking more about public libraries. In Western Europe, the 17th and 18th century are called the golden age of libraries. This is the age of enlightenment, where it's understood that secular learning is just as important. Enlightenment inspired individuals to highly invest in libraries. And this library right here is considered the ancestor of modern public libraries. At the same time, you have the foundation of national libraries. So the first true national library, founded in 1753 as a part of the British Museum. And national is meant to mean it doesn't belong to a church nor a king, and it's freely open to the public. And this is, over here is the UK. In the United States, Library of Congress was founded April 24th, 1800. And the purpose of the Library of Congress is much like the UK edition. It's supposed to be owned by the people of the country, and anyone who lives there is allowed to come in and use its services. So it's supposed to be free and open to the public, which is a huge conceptual change for a lot of individuals. This idea that knowledge doesn't just belong to an upper class individual or someone who could afford school. So because we have the foundation of the idea of public and national libraries, we move into modern libraries. In the UK, the British Public Libraries Act of 1850 gave local boroughs the power to establish free public libraries. This is a pretty big shift that they had to put into law, basically making it legal to do so. So no one could come back and say, hey, you can't do that. And this is where libraries are tax funded. So in the US, the first tax funded public library is in Petersburg, New Hampshire. So this idea that your taxpayer dollars contribute to this thing for the good of the community. And I think we're all aware of Andrew Carnegie. He gave a lot of his money to philanthropic measures. He helped promote and fund libraries across the country, whether public, academic, white, or African-American libraries. He freely gave money where he could to help these endeavors. So the reason I mentioned African-American libraries under Andrew Carnegie is he didn't just give money to historically Black colleges and universities. He gave money to help African-American public libraries, and later in the 1930s, under the New Deal, the WPA did the same thing as well. Because the reality of the 19th century in the United States and into the 20th century, a lot of facilities were segregated by race. And it's not just in the South either. So the actual first library for African Americans was in Philadelphia. It was called the Philadelphia Library Company of Colored Persons. And that whole thing is the name. It was started in 1838 by and for African Americans. African American public libraries functioned in the same way that, white libraries did. African American libraries often housed literary societies and other groups that promoted access to literature and writing within the community. And one of the reasons why there were African American libraries is that African American schools, because remember schools are segregated as well, lacked access to up-to-date materials for their students. So this was really important for the communities to have their own access to materials that they just wouldn't have access to otherwise. And that brings us to today. And today, thankfully, your local library is open to anyone in the community. Obviously, we have lots of different books and titles that cover a wide range of topics, and even organizations like FEMA recognize this as an essential service during disasters because of our access, the access we provide to internet and computers and printing should you need it. And beyond that, we also offer a wide range of programs. You're watching a virtual program right now. So if you like this really, really short history of libraries, please give us a like. And I hope you guys attend some of our other St. John's Reads events and our other virtual events as well. And I'll see everyone next time. Bye.